Yeah, the topic we have here is drainage in construction. Um, Drainage is not a new word to us. Is a word that is frequently used around us, around our neighborhood. So we all know what drainage is. So today we are going to look at the definition of drainage. Then we'll also look at the importance of drainage in construction. So why do we have to make use of drainages, around our buildings, around, our sites and all those things. So we'll be taking a look at, drainage in construction. Drainage in construction refers to the system of channels. You can see the system of channels, then pipes and structures designed to collect. Yeah, it's actually designed to, the first, to collect, then second, to control and remove excess water from a site. So it helps to control, collect, control, and remove, excess water from the site. So it prevents water accumulation, because flooding actually results to, accumulation of water. So for you to prevent that flooding, you actually need to even prevent water from accumulating. So it prevents water accumulation, reduces structural damage, and protects foundation, right, and ensures the durability and safety of buildings and infrastructure. So with this idea, you actually understand what a drainage is, because it actually helps to prevent water accumulation, it reduces structural damage, because when you have, that water accumulation, it tends to affect, the structures. You understand? So it prevents that structural damage. It protects your foundation, right, and ensures the durability and safety of buildings and infrastructure. So we'll be taking a look at the key reasons why we make provision for drainages. So the first one is prevent water damage, right? So protect structures from erosion, leaks, deterioration caused by standing water. Because when you have water standing, at a place, you understand, so you may feel it's not having any effect on some of these structures, but on a long run, it does, because it kind of, leads to deterioration, you understand, then leaks, then erosion. So erosion itself tends to even come from standing waters. When you have waters, gathering and accumulating, at a particular place. So what we actually use drainage for is to prevent, these damages that, could occur from, accumulation of water. Then the next point is protect foundation. Foundation in construction is the most pertinent, because you actually need your foundation for anything to stand. So we don't joke with foundation in construction. So when it comes to foundation, we always look for the best practices, the best standards, the best quality, you understand, to ensure that the foundation remains intact. So drainage in construction actually helps to protect, your foundation, prevents water accumulation around the foundation. All this still in results to water accumulation. So drainage itself tends to, protect and prevent water accumulation around the foundation, because it is only when you have that accumulation of water, because water carries its own pressure, which they used to call water pressure. So such accumulation will result to, water pressure, you understand, which are forces, you understand. Then when those forces, act on the foundation, so you start seeing the result of those forces, like cracks and settlement, that is differential settlement. So to prevent all this, we actually need drainage, so that it will help to reduce, or to even prevent water accumulation around the foundation, which will later result to cracks and settlement. So the next point we're looking at is prevent flooding. you know During rainy season like this, some areas are prone to flooding. because maybe poor drainage facility that they have in their community, and maybe poor channelization of such drainage. One thing is to have drainage, then the other thing is to channel your drainage properly. So all these tends to affect your structure. So prevent flooding. Proper drainage reduces surface water building up and minimizes flood risk. So it still results from build up of water. So your drainage actually helps to reduce surface water build up and minimizes flood risk. You understand? So the next point is increases durability. So enhances the lifespan of structure by keeping them dry and stable. When your structure, aside the curing period, you understand, if maybe your concrete is freshly cast concrete, you understand, yeah, you can allow accumulation of water so that the concrete can cure itself, you understand. But if your concrete is already cured and maybe it has been in water for maybe 28, 30, 40 days and thereabout, so there's no in essence of allowing a build up of water around such a concrete structure, you understand. So it's actually important you increase the durability, you understand. So when you keep your structure dry, you understand, and stable, it actually helps to increase the durability. The only time you need water around is maybe during the curing period, which is very, very essential. You understand? But if your concrete is already cured and your concrete is already has gained the required strength that it needs, then there's no need for you to keep water around it. You understand? So you have to keep such a concrete structure dry and stable. So the next point you're looking at is reduce maintenance cost, because cost in construction is very, very important. It's one of the area most construction firms look into, because how do we maximize and minimize cost? You understand? So cost of regarding material, cost regarding the construction cost and all those things. So reduces maintenance cost. So minimizes repairs and maintenance caused by water related damage. So drainage on its own actually helps to minimize and it minimize the repair cost, then the maintenance cost, and also water related damage, because since you've made provision for your drainage, you understand, so it has actually shield your building from all these water related damages. So the next thing we are looking at is the application and uses. So where is drainage used? Where do we actually make use of drainage? So the first is residential buildings and housing estates. So for most estates, you see how they tend to vigorously work on drainages for their buildings, because they understand the importance of drainage. You understand, and without drainage to effectively carry out and control water in the estate, this can actually lead to flooding. So the other area where drainage is applicable is roads, highways and bridges. So for your roads, be it internal roads, be it federal roads, be it state roads, your drainage is still very, very used here. Then highways and bridges, you also make use of your drainage. The industrial and commercial facilities. So for your industrial and commercial facilities, you also tend to make use of your drainage. Landscaping, open spaces, you make use of your drainage. Then basement and underground structures. For your basement structures, you need to understand how to even channel your water out of your basement, right? So you make use of your drainage. Then we have retaining wall and earthworks. So for your earthworks, right, for road construction, you make use of your drainage. Then for your retaining wall, you understand, you have to still drain the water that will be acting against the retaining wall from the other side. You understand? So you need your drainage. Then stormwater management system, you make use of your drainage. So we have a pictogram here that actually depicts these informations for a drainage system. So we have the surface drain. The surface drain helps to collect the water and the debris, right? Then thereby maybe materials that can't flow through, you manually pick them out. Then we have the drainage channel. This is the drainage channel itself. Then we have filter fiber. Then we have sand bedding. Then we have gravel layer. Then we have perforated pipe. That is if you're using your perforated pipe underneath your drainage. Then we have the compacted soil. That is your compacted soil around your perforated pipes. So this just gives the brief insight on drainage in construction. So with this, you'll be able to understand why drainage is being used, the importance of drainage, where drainage is applicable. You understand?